From Free Marcy to Free Pumps as we move into our second upper bracket bout for these semi-finals. This is, of course, going to be the upper bracket still, so we're looking to see who's going to be playing against Free Marcy. I am your host, Adrian Healingstat Archerlock, and joining me as we pump this up, we have Sloot and we have Caleris once again on the desk. Now, of course, this is going to be very interesting because we saw two Australian teams playing yesterday, or playing just now, and Goinmul is going to be the team up next, and they're a team coming from Korea that we saw have a bit of an upset yesterday, honestly, Caleris. Yeah,
it was impressive. I'm happy to be back once again so I can see some more awesome Warcraft done quick here as we get into it. And you're right, Goinmul, I think especially they impressed me when it came to getting that upset. And I kind of attributed it to that I think the Korean teams are going to be able to perform very well under this kind of setting as opposed to kind of bashing their heads constantly against the time trials style of play. So yeah, I've got good hopes for them.
Yeah, interesting compositions coming out of them, and we'll be able to dive into that in just a bit, but we do want to update you with the bracket, since of course not only were we playing the upper bracket side of the portion of the bracket on broadcast, we've also been doing a little bit of the lower round, and you can see Sai that were knocked out yesterday by Goinmul down to that lower bracket were able to pick up the first map against Pure Luck, so they're actually currently playing that series off broadcast, and we'll keep you up to date with that one, and the winner will play against Gulch Trotters later in the broadcast. But I do want to turn it on its head and talk about Free Pumps as well, because Free Pumps were the first team to bring in that double Windwalker composition, which we saw working or paying out dividends for them yesterday.
Yeah, it was with you that I guessed.
Yeah.
No, it's no coincidence we got these guys back for this one.
I mean, it just showed. You know, they lost the first map with the Maw of Souls, but we were so amazed with how quickly they managed to close some of that gap with that big pull.
Yeah.
Huge Windwalker damage coming out, and it was just part of their repertoire, part of how they did their pulls. Mass pulls, Windwalkers, mass pull, Windwalkers every time. So we're gonna have to see if that works out for them. Now, they didn't end up using the mage, but you know, we keep talking about this whole BRH mage Arcanist thing, and then we also talk about counter picks. You know, is it really worth them doing a mage just for that first map to try and get that win, and then kind of getting outside of that double Windwalker comfort zone with the Hunter?
Well, at least it's one of the more flexible choices you could potentially go for, right? But there's not too much flexibility in saying, you know, like if you think about the potential of, we saw like when in China, the 4 DPS from no healer, you can't really flex when they tried the Shaman. It's not as flexible as, say, a mage is going from Arcane to Fire, which is still more reputable in some of these instances. So if somebody does do it, at least it doesn't have the negative connotations of some of the flex picks at the moment.
Yeah, and that's definitely one thing worth noting. You are locked into your character and hence your class and faction, but you can swap up the specialization. So if you do want to make that transition from Arcane for this instance into Fire, that's completely acceptable. And also, like, there's the potential there to swap your healer around, although it's not really something we've seen too much. People have been sticking almost religiously to that Holy Paladin and the Restoration Druid, except for that one Discipline Priest that made Jack ever so happy last weekend, Sloot.
Why?
And it made you happy,
why do I have to comment?
I just love your face when we talk about the Discipline Priest.
Try and tilt
It's almost
Sloot.
as good as the Moonkin. And you can contribute to tilting Sloot. No, I'm not suggesting that. Please don't. Please don't. But, I mean, it's definitely, this is going to be an interesting bout, right? Like, we've got, on one side, we've got the Korean #1 team who are actually coming as the #7 team overall in the grand scheme of things, but they're going up against Australia's #3, having already defeated Australia's #2. But Free Pumps, like, we were saying this yesterday, this is a roster that isn't just like Australia's #3. They have the composition to take it all the way. And quite frankly, I could see these guys in globals.
I really hope Free Pumps takes this series so that we could have Free Marcy versus Free Pumps, and then we're going to find out who gets free.
Exactly.
It's going to be really interesting. But no, I mean, they played exceptional yesterday. They had this slight hiccup, and it really just started off the get-go in Maw of Souls with that double death on one of the Windwalkers. It was unfortunate. They only had one of the bops to go around, and, you know, they used the battle res. He just flopped over right away, and I mean, at that point, they were committed. They had to do the rest of Imran and the rest of the trash with that 4-man. Otherwise, it would cost them even more time. They're already, you know, 50%, I think, is when it happens. 50, 60%. So they had to just commit. And after that, I mean, we mentioned it already, Claire, they played catch up really, really well. It just wasn't enough by the end of it because the dungeon is so short. But let's say the dungeon had an extra one of those really big pulls, they probably would have been able to overtake.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look and really hone down on what went on in that series, if that did not occur, it was a 2-0. I think that's fair to say, right? It would have been a 2-0 in the favor of Free Pumps. So looking at their progression here going up against Goinmul, as much as, yes, Goinmul did have that upset yesterday, you would think that Free Pumps here, with the composition, they're going to, you know, take a step back from that little incident that did happen at the beginning of yesterday and say, let's not have that happen again. We know how powerful we are from that point on, and we should be able to be very strong in this series.
Yeah, and of course, More of Souls was the first map in the previous map pool, but we are now heading over to the second one. We've got those 23 keys, and we can show that map pool on your screens right now. So the first instance will be on Blackrook Hold, as was consistent with the final other series. We want to make sure, of course, that there's integrity on the line here when it comes to this, and that's why we've been talking a little bit about those Arcanist mages. But this pool overall, a little bit more challenging. Of course, the fact that we've got Seat in there, we've got 23 keys, it's not going to be as easy, and that could be an opportunity to expose weakness on Goinmul.
We saw it last time too, last weekend in the China series. I mean, Seat was rolling around, but the thing is, the Seat that we saw last year, you know, in the grand finals, it was quite the quite the bloodbath compared to what we saw this time. I mean, Seat it's tough. There's some nasty trash in there, but if you have a well-practiced strat and can execute well, it's really not that bad. Yeah. And it's not the longest of dungeons. And we saw Skyline D, for instance, just do an exceptional job. I think they ran it twice actually last weekend, if I'm not mistaken. They just did an exceptional job. So, you know, there can be a bit of curveball, or at least maybe used to be a bit of a curveball with Seat. But I think at this point, teams have really picked up on that, and it's probably a dungeon that they're just going to hammer because it's forced in the third pool, and it's present in the second pool, and teams are going to pick it. Yeah,
it's a lot more refined nowadays, and as you were mentioning with Skyline D, especially since they had the double rogue, so they were able to shroud into locations, shroud out of locations as well. It made everything very, very clean for them. Now, of course, we've barely seen. Have we seen any rogues?
I don't think so.
Here
I was going to mention that as well. Like, we've seen some interesting skips, but without the rogues. But of course, you got that alluring room at the end, and if you finish Seat correctly, then you feel like a king. But we are ready to dive into this game. Blackrook Hold will be the first map. Once again, Free Pumps versus Goinmul. Free Pumps, of course, playing for that opportunity to go up against Free Marcian. I mean, if both those teams qualified, we would have 2 Freedom teams in the land of freedom for the global finals. So we'll have to see if that's possible. But looking to stop them, we have Goinmul from Korea, who've already upset one. Can they upset again?
So without the rogue players, as we mentioned earlier, both teams are forced to use that Invis pot right off the bat. They will have a 10-minute lockout on those potions leading up to the Amalgam of Souls, that first boss. Yeah. Both teams having no problems, just jumping right in there.
Yeah, and you know, as much as this skip is very, very common and very traditional, one thing that may elude some of the people watching is, why do you skip these packs? Things like counselors, having to interrupt all healing abilities, and making sure there's actually a lot of abilities across those packs that are very, very problematic and annoying.
Fortunately, we don't have to discuss them because no one ever does them in the first place. Yeah. Goinmul and Free Pumps both having pulled the boss at almost the same time. Free Pumps just slightly ahead with their Bloodlust timer. Once again, we're seeing no mages come out of either teams here, but we're also not seeing that double, actually, we're not seeing any Windwalkers on Free Pumps side. Hilarious. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, a bit of a change-up. So looking for a bit more utility than anything, especially having, you know, the Warlock and the Hunter there available. Warlock's going to, on both sides, be able to slow things down quite nicely. Of course, with the Arsenal being able to play on the Moonkin too. So doing this first boss, obviously, a few things that you guys have already spoken about, of course, but that 180 cleave is always something you want to dodge, as well as the spinning scythes and the debuff put on one of the range players that they're going to have to run around with a little bit, make sure they don't take some damage.
Yeah, of course, and anyone caught in that swirling zone will get nuked and feared, so it's important that not only do you run away from it, but also try to position it in a good spot, because there are some combinations where the tank does need to run away from that frontal cone, and of course, if the melee completely decorate and litter the back of the boss in those swirly zones, as I've had to experience myself, you're not in a very good situation, so doing well to position those. Now, at 50%, as we know, the Amalgam will enter that kind of transitional phase where he will spawn 8 spirits around the edge of the room. Both, actually, excuse me, one of the teams not having a druid that can root one of them, but they will try to make sure to keep one of those spirits away from the boss, as the boss will not re-engage until all 8 spirits are either absorbed or killed until that 15% mark.
Yeah, and usually the plan is, as you can see on the right-hand side here by Free Pumps, is to slow the other side down whilst Gorfin's grasping in one of the other sides so that you can AoE that as well while everything is slowed. So it really makes for a good cleanup. If you don't do that, DPSing them down singly on every single angle is nigh on impossible at these high levels of key, so Gorfin grasps is of the utmost importance.
Yeah, it does slow the teams down a lot if they have to start branching off the boss, losing a lot of that effective cleave. Amalgam at the low 30s for both teams right now, looking to be, you know, matching each other for DPS. We're seeing a lot of offensive value come out of both of those healers. Jack would be really proud backstage right now in the green room. Sears getting so low there with that explosion from Amalgam. Luckily managed to hang on to their health. Amalgam soon having their explosion in just a moment for Free Pumps on the right side of the screen.
Yeah, not too bad. As Free Pumps will eventually clean this up. And from this point on, it looks like Amalgam of Souls, likewise, Goinmul catching up a little bit in terms of that percentage. So that little bit of slight experience and advantage, I should say, in that single target DPS works well.
But you know, the Druid actually, the Druids can, rest of Druids, of course, they can actually output a fair bit of damage as we're seeing here. Didn't match quite the damage of the Holy Paladin in the end, but certainly nothing to scoff at. Amalgam will be falling first for Goinmul on the left side of the screen, after which they will start that RP, getting ready to move up one of the Rooks of Blackrook Hold with all the spiders involved. Now, this pull can be a bit dangerous as a result of, we do have that bursting affix right now, so they have to be careful to manage their stacks properly. We did see some kind of fatalities with that in the previous series in BRH, so they want to make sure not to either kill things too quickly all at the same time, let some of those stacks drop, or of course either use mass CDs and immunities and just obliterate everything quickly. Yeah,
they've got up a good position to kind of stagger some of the damage that they're end up doing, especially, you know, when you actually listen to the comms of some of these teams as well. They're very good about calling, okay, stop DPS, stop damage, so that you could allow those to wear off and then just be able to continue on. So as they are going to run up, did they actually leave a member or two behind?
So oftentimes these pulls go one of two ways. They either opt to pull all of spiders up to the top, group moves with them, or the tank will run up by themselves and bring everything back down to allow a better line of sight advantage. Now, because if the tank does run up by themselves, it can cause some problems with line of sight, not only for healing the tank, but also for damaging the spiders as the tank tries to run away. And you get a group separation, as you saw with some of those green swirlies on the ground, that the spiders do leave when they die.
Yeah, I think Minihal has stuck back for just a little bit there, and now will eventually be joining, as you can see here. I mean, there was the misdirect going down on the tank anyway, so that's all good. Warlock's going to be sending them on through, and death goes down. Yeah,
death from that dot, because these spiderlings do apply a really nasty magic shadow dot to the tank, so it's just a bit too much to handle for LC over on Free Pump side. Managed to get that res up. Unfortunately, they're forced to use that battle res, which just sucks at this point, because you just got that first checkpoint on the boss, so battle res is down right before what is probably some of the nastiest trash in the dungeon leading up to Ilisana, the second boss.
Yeah, and afterwards as well, so you ideally would like to have those available to you, but just dealing with the rest of the spiders, and the big spider here too is Goinmul, and just going to slowly creep themselves ahead whilst joining the next trash up towards the top. But there's so many abilities that are available to the trash that can cause you a few issues, and obviously you need to kind of like loosely spread if you're not going to actually take control of the cat, of course, up at the very top.
Now, of course, the biggest problem with a lot of the abilities, such as the Knife Dance and, you know, the Bone-Breaking Strike from the champion, is that they must be hard interrupted. You have to displace, disorient, stun, whatever it may be. We're seeing a really big pull coming in here from Goinmul. They seem to be going ham, if you will, as they move down the rest of the hall. Pretty typical from the other teams that we've seen as well. We'll have that big AoE grip, as we just see on Goinmul on the left side of the screen. They're going to get as much CC down as possible, after which the tank will start kiting and line of sighting these mobs if needed, in order to mitigate the amount of damage that not goes out on the tank, but rather on the group, Claris.
Yeah, and the tank's just, as you say, just going to continue to kite on back here with everyone keeping at good range. They're sitting a little bit of damage there, but shouldn't be too problematic. The Warlock just being able to spam Seed of Corruption and Corruption on all of this, so it is all slowed down as well. Very good position for them with that Legendary Ring.
DK doing well there, of course, to grip that one cat, offering it some catnip, and then, of course, controlling Undead on it. It is probably one of the most dangerous mobs in this area. They are doing well to slow down the damage Goinmul on the left side of the screen. That is in order to very well control those bursting stacks coming up. Free Pumps, in the meantime, on the right side of the screen, doing a similar pull here. We do have those champions that are still alive, as they innately have more health than the rest of the members, but now Commander Shamalama Ding Dong has come down for both sides, and we do know, Claris, that that door leading up to Ilisana will not open unless that commander dies.
Yeah, and you know, with that pull before, you know, why do you take control of that companion? Well, the Bloodthirsty Leap, it's not too bad if you've got range members which can spread out, but if they're 10 yards within one another and that leap does hit, it actually does a lot of damage. And actually, I believe it leaves a dot as well.
It does leave a dot indeed. Right you are, Kalar.
There you go.
But we also have to keep in mind that we actually have a death coming over on Goinmul, as I interrupt myself, because that is another 5 seconds on the clock. And now both teams are in the same ball pit at the moment, not having access to their battle res leading up to Ilisana. And what I was about to mention actually leads into this as well. We're not in that fortified setting, so the cats are really really aren't as dangerous right now as we're making them out to be. Nothing too catastrophic about what they would do in that fortified setting, but Ilisana does a ton of damage. Both teams not having access to that battle res with those brutal glaives going out in this tyrannical setting could spell disaster for one of these teams.
Yeah, you're going to have to see some good movement as well. Usually, you know, we've seen the Warlock have to deal with the I-Beam later in the second phase. I wouldn't even mind, you know, Warlock gates to be able to just cruise from one side to the other to then have unhindered DPS for about, you know, 6 or 7 seconds while that's going on. But we saw just kind of staggered movement while that was going on in the previous series. So, you know, small min-maxing things, I guess.
Free Pumps tabulating one more death on the board. Unfortunately, that's an extra 5 seconds on the board for them. Both teams now working on the exact same pack, the last pack before we get up to Ilisana rounding that corner as she menacingly waits for the platform, overlooking the players prior to this, killing all the trash and waiting to sink her glaives into one of them. Goinmul, actually, they both have the same trash percentage. Goinmul, of course, just having not killed one of these 2 archers or the commander just yet.
Yeah, very close between the two, so not too bad at all. And, you know, moving up there, you were mentioning the brutal glaive on the boss eventually. Something that is important is that once that actually does hit, the dot that it leaves on you is actually quite heavy. So you ideally do want to get yourself a personal CD going when that's about to be happening.
Not to mention that it really quite easily can spiral out of control with that Grievous as well. As soon as those players dip below that 90% mark, we will have that Grievous starts ramping up on the players. And if the healer starts to fall too far behind, it could really be devastating for the group. Both teams pretty much almost at the same time getting ready here to pull Ilisana.
And we'll start here as just going on towards it. And obviously they want to start forming little triangles when that when the abilities actually begin. Obviously the Dark Rush is the most important thing about that. And then just being able to move out. You don't want to be taking extra ticks, especially on Tyrannical, when Ilisana is doing huge amounts of damage.
The Brutal Glaives going out, and of course, glaving that player, a heavy bleed. Mini Hala going down over on Goinmul's side. And what we were just talking about, they don't have that battle res active. They will have it active in a few seconds, but for now, they're left 4-manning, which is slowly going to put Goinmul behind Free Pumps. Free Pumps soon to enter, actually, excuse me, has now entered that transition phase where we will have the extra Arcanist and the extra champion spawning, wanting to make sure to interrupt that Arcanist constantly, as he will get an increasing damage buff the more successful Arcane Blasts go out.
And you can see how much, just in general, the Dark Rush did. I can't even tell if one tick of the flames actually went off there, but if you're a hunter in that position, as soon as that Dark Rush hits, yes, you can walk out of it, but if you really want to be truly safe, you can technically disengage out of it for that instant response to what's actually going on.
Or just pre-turtle, man. I don't take
good too.
I don't want to take any risks. Might have not had it available, of course, because they just did a lot of that dangerous trash downstairs, so not sure if that CD was up just yet. Ilisana now in her I-beam phase, the transition phase for Goinmul, whilst already falling and coming down for Free Pumps as they resume her first phase again. They should be able to finish it off in that phase. I don't think we'll see a second transition phase.
Yeah, it should be okay. Should be okay. Meanwhile, Goinmul finally did get themselves up the Hunter in Mini, so they can eventually start catching up a little bit. But you can see how much that death costs. You know, you said that Free Pumps was going to be able to catch up. Right now, that 8%, with this race having been so close, could be pivotal.
And we're probably going to see a full wipe come out of them here. Ilisana does indeed go back down. Minahala falling after their healer has already fallen. We do see the proc on that Purgatory on the tank, and we're going to have a full wipe out of Goinmul. Goinmul going all the way back to the start of the era. Actually, no, they did save themselves. They called the wipe. They did save themselves there with that failure detection pylon, luckily, so they avoided that huge run back from the first checkpoint. Ilisana down to 30% now on Free Pump side.
Tough stuff at the moment there, as you say, with Ilisana going down quite quickly here now for Free Pumps on the other side. But the problem is that once you actually have those initial deaths in one wipe or whatever, you know, because it is a tyrannical setting, these bosses are taking longer anyway, and you have the potential to just have the same thing happen again. We saw how vulnerable Mini was in that first fight. There's no reason that there wasn't another potential death here unless he's playing very, very well and very meticulously.
We have seen actually Free Pumps use their Bloodlust during the fight, the second half of this fight. CD is now just down below 9 minutes. Fortunately for Goinmul, they had not actually used it before they wiped, so they were able to pop Bloodlust on the second pull. So, you know, trying to salvage the best of a bad situation here for them in the meantime. Goinmul and Ilisana now just about to fall, 3% for Free Pumps, and they will start making their way up to that first staircase with the boulders and to what will likely be, Claris, that huge pull with the Blade Lords.
Yeah, I liked that there was actually a Warlock's Gate down in the middle of that, but it was such a small distance It didn't matter too much anyway. So once, as you mentioned, big pull probably going to be coming out from them. And this one for me is one of the scariest. I mean, it's not fortified, so it's not as troublesome, but it still causes some problems with the amount of sheer damage that can come out. So it's going to be a kiting pack towards the end of it.
I thought you were referencing the boulder smashing you in the face, but we are indeed talking about the trash in the second balcony as we see LC rearing up to likely pop the sky step, go all the way to the end of the hall, pulling all three of the Blade Lords.
Oh.
We do have another wipe likely coming out of Goinmul, unfortunately, on the left side of the screen. That's going to be another 25 seconds on the clock plus the res time, and this time they were in that bad situation where they had used the Bloodlust. They don't have Bloodlust available. They're going to have to pull it the third time, so all eyes on Free Pumps on the right side of the screen as their Blood DK does move up and pull everything in this hallway.
Yeah, Lysana's a scary beast, but there's Goffin Grass once again. Chaos Nova's going to come out so they can start dealing a lot of this big damage. A ton of corruption seeds coming out here. With So the Seeds as well, talented in for this Warlock. And the Solar Beam even came down here just to continually silence those. Of course, they do move out of it eventually, but if you could just buy a little bit more time while the big damage is coming out on the rest of the group there, it could be pivotal in killing off the rest of this group.
So it's going to be really important here is how well the group manages to stagger the bursting stacks that come up from this really huge pull. They're doing well here. Kill a large portion of the smaller adds, waiting for that debuff to grab off. They will now kill the second portion of the adds, likely the Blade Lords as well, which we always emphasize this. Their brutal assault is, well, frankly, quite brutal. It does a ton of damage to the tank. Really important to interrupt it after the channel's gone out, after the cast has gone out, while the channel starts, to make sure that they don't just repeat it as soon as that CC is done.
And once Indigestion is cast, it's actually not too bad for the group. It's very easy to dodge out of Fire Breath, that you can easily get some damage on some of those minions once you get away. LC is going to be heading on the way up, making sure that nothing touches us. I like that our observers have switched to this just in case. Oh, just in case.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
LC caught between a rock and a hard place because once one of those boulders hit you, you do get stunned for 4 or 5 seconds. Luckily manages to have a bit of luck with the boulder spawning on the opposite side of the staircase, so it doesn't incur that death, gets to the top, and stops the flow of boulders coming in as the rest of the group luckily safely manages to follow suit and go upstairs as well.
Yeah, I like how he was wraith walking as well, so he's a little bit faster whilst doing it and still gets hit. Poor LC. We didn't
Poor
see anything.
DK's really the slowest tank of them all.
Yeah, you're right.
Free Pumps now moving up the stairwell for this gauntlet. Typically, teams will pull all 6 of these Dominators to either Smash Spite's room, or as we saw a lot of the Chinese teams do, they actually park in this little foyer area here, making sure to absorb everything and leave some of the bats up. Now, the reason to do that is because sometimes you want to pull some of these bat pups with the boss to kind of benefit some of that cleave and AoE damage and focus it into slowing target on the boss. Rogues notoriously, of course, are good for this, but there's no rogues present for Free Pumps right now. However, they do park there. Now, the Dangerous Calaris here really isn't so much on the tank unless this trash lasts too long, but rather the fact that these Dominators will cast sick bats on a random target, causing this mass amount of bat pups to just focus someone and pretty much immediately one-shot them.
Yeah, you were mentioning rogues before. It feels like APAC just doesn't believe in rogues. They just have no appreciation for the rogue.
There might be some around here, but they could be stealth and we wouldn't see them. And Goinmul on the left side of the screen having another death, of course, having no access to that battle res. About 4.5 minutes left until they'll be able to do that, so they will have to deal with the remaining half of Ilisana's health with a 4-man group. Free Pumps just now pulling Smash Bite.
Yeah, so a few mechanics to be paying attention to, of course. Those bats around the arena will eventually throw down some green goopy stuff, and you can actually manipulate where you're placing that, so you just kind of pull it to the side and make sure that you've got a lot of room to be moving around in here on the balcony. And of course, the charge from Smash Spite, as well as some big AoEs that do go down, Flute.
Yeah, the big AoEs are, I mean, quite menacing, especially in this tyrannical setting. Now, we're not at the point now where they will one-shot the group and players have to start gearing too defensively with Pridus and what have you. It should be safe, but we will see some pretty scary dips coming from some of the players. Team doing well here to rotate that charge and make sure that no one person eats 2 charges in a row, of course, unless they have a very heavy defensive buff on them or the tank is taking it themselves. And doing well, really, with their real estate, seeing how well they layer that kind of bat guano on the side of the room, making sure that it's not too invasive for them.
As long as it doesn't smell of ammonia, I guess you'll be fine. But overall, yeah, you're right. With the AoE that's important as well when you're coming up against a Grievous setting is that in the end, as long as you are negating the Grievous after that big smash does come out from Smash Spite, you're going to be in a good position. And the rest of Druid's good for doing that.
In the end, it doesn't even matter. You're absolutely right, Calaris. Free Pumps now getting ready, starting to hit that halfway mark on Smash Spite. Now, this fight, as attributed to kind of that goop that comes on the side of the screen, does start to get scarier and scarier because you start to run out of space, and the boss will AoE punt players around the room, and eventually you will have no space and you'll be punted into one of these green goop lines, incurring some of the dot that you don't want to deal with. So you want to make sure that you're killing these boss as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, we have had the full screen now for free pumps.
Yeah, and eventually, you know, you see, like, for example, our Moonkin's sealed off on the other side of it. So there are moments where, you know, you might potentially have to reposition if you're really running out of space. But as you can see, very good control so far by the rest of the team here, just to be able to drop it on the sides. Now, Smash Bite, I mean, all bosses in tyrannical settings have a lot of health. And eventually, as you say, look at how much or how little room is starting to show itself here on this balcony.
I was actually quite worried for a moment there that the players were actually purposely trying to make a satanic circle, but it seems like they finally pierced a line through the middle, dividing that very odd shape that they were making. But you're right, I was actually thinking the exact same thing as you were saying it. This guy's still only at 40% health. This is taking a really long time. They don't have access to that Bloodlust, as they did end up using it as soon as it popped on Elisana, the second boss, but they will have access to it then for Kurtalos and Dentalianax when they go upstairs.
Yeah, so this is eventually going to die off. 22%, everyone's still very healthy. Likely another Smash going to come in, and then from there, they should be fine as long as they're able to survive that. Still plenty of mana left on our Rested Druid as well, so he's not feeling too much pressure.
5 stacks of that charge buff going down on that Havoc, doing well to avoid them and make sure that he doesn't get one shot, because at that amount of stacks, when the Tyrannical 23 settings, you will get one shot. Smash Spite being moved slowly towards the entrance. I like when teams do this, trying to take every advantage possible for that min-maxing. If Smash Spite were to die on the lower part of the screen, players would waste some precious seconds having to run all the way to the exit.
Yeah, you're right, and it does trigger the checkpoint right after this, right?
Yes, yeah. So any death after right now, well,
hey.
If anybody else dies, they will be able to release and come down here, but they will likely, from what we've seen for all the teams, be pulling everything all the way to the top of the Rook, the Spire here, AoEing it down. Usually we do see the Blood DK control undead on one of these Lancers to help them during the boss. Another death going down for Goinmul on the left side, though.
But they got past Ilyasana.
They did.
That's what we like to see as they're trying to catch up. But again, you know, we've mentioned it time and time again when it comes to these runs. They are not only hoping for free pumps to have a wipe, but probably another wipe, and maybe another wipe.
That would be an accurate statement as to the strategy that they're going into this map planning for. Free pumps pulling all of these Lancers and the Swordsman to the top of the stairs. Swordsman, of course, doing a menacing coup de grace on the tank, which, if it casts successfully, will do a massive hit. The Lancers, meanwhile, providing some area denial with that Raven's Dive. If you're caught within that swirly, as we can see the huge spike there on the Blood DK, luckily no damage done in the end. But if you're caught in that swirly from the Raven's Dive, you will be stunned for 5 seconds, and it doesn't DR. So with the amount of mobs that they pulled, if they keep casting Raven's Dive on top of you, you're just basically stun locked the entire time. Yeah,
and throwing up the AMS as well, just trying to soak up any damage. Thankfully, another Chaos Nova comes out there, even though it was a little bit on DR. Eventually is able to clean things up, and everyone just taking a bit of bursting damage. And that Moonkin does stay alive as well. So no extra deaths going down. Still only the 2 for free pumps, looking solid.
And actually, they didn't opt to control Undead on one of the Lancers that we typically see teams do. So they will be going into Kurtalos / Dentalianax, the final encounter of the dungeon, with the trash percentage already completed. Goinmul just now getting ready to pull that the gauntlet up to the 3rd boss.
Important to note, Mini did die to the boulders.
It is. I missed it.
I'm sorry.
Why didn't you get my attention?
I'm sorry. But Kurtalos is going to be the first, and the real thing that you want to watch out for here, of course, is that glaive. You always know exactly where he's going to be facing, and then you can actually dodge that quite effectively. And likewise, there is always that beam sometimes, which becomes a far more prominent figure in this fight later down the line. Yeah,
the players will have to dodge that clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on which direction it will spawn in. But Kurtalos, of course, we know we don't actually have to get down to 0%. As soon as he hits that 20% mark, the RP will start where Dentalianax, there we go, will spawn in the middle of the room, starting the RP. Now, we do have that kind of danger period before players get their 300% buff, where Dentalianax will be meleeing the tank and do that AoE Shadow Bolt volley as if the players had the buff, which of course they don't yet. So we're going to see a lot of defensives coming up and some immunities wherever they can, coming up for that AoE Shadow Bolt volley.
And thankfully for them, you know, with the run being as clean as it has, as it says, Gulch Trotters there for a moment, you know, 2 battle reses mean that it presents a lot more safety when you're going into that. As you say, you know, you want those CDs available, but the 2 battle reses is really a good linchpin for them.
Yeah. You have to be careful, though. If somebody does die from that AoE Shadow Bolt volley, it's imperative that they get rezzed immediately and take it right away, because if you take it after that 300% buff, or actually debuff technically, is applied, you will miss it, and you'll just basically chain die for the rest of the encounter, and you might as well just stay dead at that point. Of course, nobody dying here. We do have a very durable Warlock, Havoc Demon Hunter, and 2 Druids that can shift into bear for that AoE Shadow Bolt volley, no problem. The first Stinging Swarm does go out on the Blood Decay, no problem for that. That's who we want to see it go on, actually. Tank, minimal damage done there. They do AoE it down, cleave it down, and are getting ready for their first Dreadlord's Guile phase. Yeah,
you're right. Well, regardless of what you want to do you want to drop Darkness? Do you want to go Blur? Do you want to have Unending Resolve, Dark Pact on the side of the Warlock as well? It's all up to your flavor and preference, as they're just going to be able to avoid this quite nicely. Make sure you don't run into any of those clouds. Once again, I'm sure you guys had a lovely singing contest before. It was beautiful. Even Adrian got involved. I loved it. But for this one, he's not here.
I'm not going to lie. I was actually just regularly discussing the mechanics of the boss. Adrian decided to chime in with his lovely voice. Yeah. And hopefully he does in the future again. But you will have to make do for now with just us 2. Free Pumps popping that drums. Of course, they don't have a natural bloodlust in this group, so they will have to suffer that 5% less haste during that 40-second period. Nonetheless, they do have about 20 seconds left on that buff right now, and they're just trying to get Dentalianax down as quickly as they can before the next Dreadlord's Guile, but I don't think that's going to happen. They're probably going to have to deal with one more rotational phase, but at this point, I mean, who cares? They're so far ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they barely even truly have to worry about actually stacking up to be able to deal with the Parasite that comes down, but they're going to do it anyway out of simplicity and just be able to AoE burst that down super fast. Dentalianax at the moment, 45%. Goinmul going into Smash Spite here and almost killed it off. And looking at the control of their goop that they've been able to throw down, it looks like they had a bit more space, so they must have done a bit better here on Smash Spite, but it's a little bit too late.
Too little, too late, indeed. There is a finite amount of lines that go down from the bats. Eventually, the first ones that spawn do start to despawn, so it's really just about managing them throughout the fight. Dentalianax down to 34% as Free Pumps dealing with their last transitional phase right now. I'm not going to lie, even a full wipe from Pumps right now might not be enough, because we have a 65-second differential between the 2 teams, which, according to my math, is 1 minute and 5 seconds.
There you go. Quick math. Nice. I like it. Very well done. Dentalianax here is just going to be slowly being burnt down as well, and they were able to deal with that previous phase quite nicely. One of the clouds did scare me briefly for a moment as they were skirting around up towards the top, but they, from their perspectives, they were able to see the opening and then get through quite quickly.
Yeah, so Dentalianax going down to 18% now. Quite confident that they will be taking this. And, you know, this is a huge advantage that we always discuss at the table. I'm sure we'll mention in a moment. Adrian's already giving me the eye that he will mention this. But huge advantage, of course, with these map picks coming up in favor of Free Pumps as they get Dentalianax down to the single integer digits of health remaining. Goinmul going all the way up to the top of the stairs. They got to know that they're behind at this point. Getting ready to pull the trash with... they've actually finished the trash, but too little too late, as we mentioned earlier. And we do have Free Pumps with that first game win.
Yeah, and a huge advantage for Free Pumps now that they've won that first game. Even if they were to lose the second game, they would have the third game advantage. Like, it's something... I mean, it's just crazy that. It's crazy. But honestly, a great run coming out of Free Pumps there. And, the thing that was really crazy to me is this is the most versatility we've seen coming out of any roster. Not only did the 2 Windwalkers swap, they actually had 4 class swaps since last time. I think the Paladin Subs, he went over to the Restoration Druid. Avanche swapped from Hunter to Affliction Warlock. And then, of course, we saw those 2 Windwalkers swapping up to other DPS as well. And this is really great for them because they had this really high bursty composition for the slightly easier key, but then they were able to have that extra defensive capability with this swap. I mean, all their DPS were incredibly tanky.
I mean, I think they just might be playing the long game here, kind of like we saw with some of the Resto Druid picks in the previous map for Cathedral, you know, with that huge skip and res. You know, they might just be totally comfortable saying, hey, you know what? We've practiced this map with this comp. We know we can win it. We're going to perform well. We're going to win it. We might lose the second map. That's okay. But again, that advantage we keep talking about, they might have rehearsed and practiced to death some other map with this comp that's going to help a lot with, you know, the Chaos Novas, the solar beams coming down, everything, and they're just ready for that third map. If they win the second one, great. If they don't, then they're ready for the third win.
And talking about those defensive capabilities, you saw how it didn't really work out for the Hunter that they switched away from on the other side. Ilyasana is a very, very dangerous boss, especially on this tyrannical setting. And for a Hunter, compared to the Warlock's resilience, it can be a little bit treacherous, especially if you don't have the pre-turtle, as you were mentioning before, or the presence of mind to have that disengage right and readily available.
Yeah, that was actually exactly where I was going to throw with that one. But it's incredible to see that Free Pumps, they have been the first team to really utilize that, displaying their versatility to beat the 23 and apply further pressure to Goinmul, who honestly are looking up against it in this one. The safer strategy definitely doing well against the career #1. Will they have an answer? That's what we'll be looking to see after the break, as we do, of course, look to see if we're going to have that full free affair in the upper bracket. Free Pumps pump it up in game 1 as they're 1-up against Goinmul. And now, of course, Goinmul with the map choice will be taking us back to an instance the Sloot is very familiar with, having just casted it. We'll be heading to Lower Karazhan for map 2. I am your host, Adrian Healingstad Archerlock, and joining me once again on the desk, we do have Sloot and Kalaris for this series to decide who goes up against Free Marcy in the next game, which will, of course, be in that upper bracket finals. It's something that will decide who is the first team to go to the global finals of this ANZ and Korea region. Of course, we do have have the lower bracket games happening at the same time, so we can have a little update there on the bracket, and we can see that Psy versus Pure Luck is actually tied 1 apiece right now. So Psy, the number 2 seed, clearly having some issues down there in that lower bracket against Pure Luck, who maybe if they get lucky might be able to actually eliminate one of the favorites coming into the tournament.
It's anyone's game, Adrian, and we mention this every time, just with how tight the seeds are. I feel like a broken record here, but that's really the truth of it. We can already see 1-1 ties in the lower bracket going around right now. I mean, it's not impossible that one of these teams in the lower bracket just climb their way right back to the top in the grand finals. And
it's something we saw last week as well. There were some teams that were really far down there. They didn't quite make it to the end because we did have our number 1 and 2 come out of it on top, but I mean, it's definitely something to see, and Psy would be one of those teams if you were to bet anyone making it out of that lower bracket. But let's talk about the next game, since we are going back to lower Karazhan. It's an instance that, of course, we just saw the exact same affixes as well, Necrotic being that third one that has been locked in here for Goinmul. What do we expect to see out of the Koreans? Do you think they can pull it off on this map? I
wonder if they were actually inspired by our previous series, because there was so many really good pulls coming in from a team that had, you know, been clearly very well versed on I think the 3 main pulls that were especially exciting for me to see. The very, very big ones, bringing it back right after the Opera event, of course, and then all the way up to the top, went in front of Maiden, etc. And the one at the crowd as well, bringing the double ushers too, to be actually able to clean that up, then to take the front ushers all the way through to the rest of that balcony. So I would love to see some stuff like that again. It depends if they can kind of pull it off, though. It's a bit tricky.
I mean, the trickiness really lies in the Necrotic. It's just really restrictive for the tank. And, I mean, we saw some excellent large pulls, but we did see a few hiccups from the tanks in the previous series on the lower. I mean, a lot of perks being procced, and even a couple of deaths for the tanks, too. So that's really where the difficulty is going to lie with these massive pulls, along with, of course, the expected, you know, chain interrupts and CC that need to come on the mobs, especially with some of those Fireland portals cast under the stage.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, of course. It is a flimsy, floppy composition by Goinmul by comparison to Free Pumps that have really locked in safety for this series. And the map choice and the affixes selected may not be the hardest as we head over to lower Karazhan. We'll have to see with the Fortified Volcanic and Necrotic if it's going to be enough for Goinmul to pull back one in this series, or if it's going to be a free win for Free Pumps.
Right off the bat, Glaris, you know what we're going to see. We're going to see that control undead on that spirit, that forlorn spirit. It just takes so much time to kill that one mob by itself. It's just such a waste of time. I'm going to be really interested to see how the teams, there's just so many little different strats you could do here in terms of mass skipping, the healer going downstairs by themselves with their own skip to start that RP on the Opera event while everybody else dies and gets battle res downstairs. So we'll have to see which direction these teams head in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 60% of the time, you may as well put these guys at 20 seconds to start the very fight, because, you know, most of the time you see those 4 deaths, all very, very intentional, very, very calm, but a lot of damage actually going out on that first trash pack there to start things for Free Pumps, so they're looking to clean a little bit of it up.
I think Sups is already stealthing downstairs, though, if I'm not mistaken, getting ready to start that Opera event after they clean up the rest of this pack and they release the Forlorn Spirit, which is already kind of a hint and indication as to where the pack is going. Oftentimes, that Spirit is released at the Opera event, wanting to kill it in front of the stage, but the team does opt to release it at the top so that they can get rezzed by Sups, who has already started that event. The team will likely backtrack back up that doorway just for a moment to clean up some of the trash while waiting for the RP.
Goinmul here, just going on to 1 or 2 of the packs, and it seems like they got a bit of a slower start with how we're going to have their healer transition on down there to eventually do the same thing. But as you say, those packs are very, very annoying.
I actually think it was their healer that did die, because they do have 1 death on the board, so perhaps a bit of a miscalculation or a misstep with their immunity and the running down, or their invisibility, excuse me, and running downstairs there. Free Pumps getting ready now, of course, to fight this Beauty and the Beast encounter, where we do have 4 mobs simultaneously active on the stage at the same time. Coggleson, of course, the evil stove from hell, will not be accessible, will be immune until the other 3 are dead. Bablet, of course, Miss Cauldron, and Luminor, the guy that will spawn all the fire around the stage. Now, I mean, there's tactical advantages with killing different ones first. However, cleaving, as we know, is not really effective unless it is boosting your single target damage, because the mobs will heal once one dies.
Yeah, this fight throws everything at you but the kitchen sink, because for me, Bablet is one of the ones that you actually want to focus down, but they're going to take Luminor first here, just to kind of limit some of the potential of the stoppages that you're going to have to potentially encounter if you want to be moving around, maybe running away from Bablet, etc. So Luminor is going to fall first.
Weird. I actually consider Luminor to probably be one of the least restrictive ones, especially because you can combine it with that drenched or wet debuff from Miss Cauldron and start clearing up some of this trash. Nonetheless, they do opt to kill that one first. Bablet Bablet, looks like Mrs. Cauldron will indeed be the next one going down, after which we'll have Bablet, the broom that will sweep the nation, going around the room, going down third, and then they will have access to Coggleston. Goinmul on the left side of the screen, just now pulling the encounter.
And throwing down that solar beam as well, just to kind of stop things from going on over there. Bablet's being kited quite nicely. One death going down on the other side, though, as Harvey gets killed off. So Rez is going to have to come out on towards that Windwalker Monk, and that's a costly death.
That is, I mean, they don't have access to another battle res for about 7 minutes now, so they're going to need to play really clean. This is Goinmul's map pick too, so you'd think they would have rehearsed this. Fortunately, they did have that battle res active, otherwise they would have been really detrimental. They would have 4-man the rest of this encounter. Free Pumps on the right side of the screen, finishing off that broom that is sweeping around. Bablet now at 50%. If that broom does reach its focus target, it can't be tanked. It will do mass damage and disorient that target for quite a while, I think something like 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So important to make sure that you're properly kiting Bablet around and getting away from it.
Yeah, definitely. And make sure you're not walking into any kind of volcanics while that's going on as well here in this volcanic necrotic setting. And then Cogglestone will eventually become active. So he's got a few abilities, of course. I think it's called Karazam. I love the name of that ability. To be able to spawn the forks. That's such a great ability name.
So the forks do spawn, and there's actually a two-sided danger. Not only do the forks do a lot of damage, and Cogglestone does do a cast as well that will increase the haste of nearby allies, in this case the forks, of course. But there's also, the more mobs that are up, if these forks don't go checked, the tank will start to accrue a large amount of necrotic stacks, and it's very difficult to kite these boss encounters, as they often can't be slowed by, you know, the D&D or the Warlock.
Yeah, so working that down, Coggleston doesn't present too much of an issue for them, and they will be able to transition on. Now, the big question is that how are they going to be pulling this? I mean, they do have tools available to do a similar massive pull if they want. One thing that's very important is that, you know, not only is Gorfien's Grasp a great tool to be able to get everything together to eventually AoE it, once those Firelance portals actually cast off, when the Blood Death Knight goes forwards, as it looks like they will be going for that huge pull, then you can actually interrupt those Firelance portals with the Gorfien's Grasp as well. Never mind the potential stuns that come out from the rest of the group later. Yeah,
so a nice advantage from Free Pumps as well, because they do have that solar beam that goes down from that Boomkin, providing that, I believe, 8-second silence on the group. Then, of course, they can link it into a Chaos Nova, or likely they have some Blood Elves going around, and should enjoy it while they can. Making sure none of those casts get off at all, using some of those beams to their advantage as well for increased damage, and they absolutely just annihilate this group. Really textbook example from Free Pumps, as they already start to head up to the front stage area where we will encounter the ushers.
Yeah, I love it. Really well executed. Elsie actually had like 5 volcanics right next to him in a wall there for a moment, but, you know, dealt with. It's not exactly the hardest thing to run away from, so those ushers are going to be picked up. And of course, all you've got to really look out is for those flashlights. Don't be kissing in the back row, guys. That's all we want you to make sure you're not doing, and then you should be fine.
I told you it was a one-time thing, right?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry about that. So you want to make sure you do turn around for those flashlights, else they will disorient you and do about double the damage. Free Pump's doing well to grab the ushers. I do expect they're kind of going to circle around once some of their CDs come off cooldown here. And indeed they do. We do see this massive pull on the stage here where the DK will likely grip everything together. I'm not sure actually if Gorfien's is available yet. Likely not.
Yeah.
Get everything together, establish aggro, and then immediately get out of there, doing well to pre-AMS and prevent a lot of those necrotic stacks from applying as he slowly rounds everything up, which unfortunately every other tank has to do. They don't have the luxury of that AoE grip always.
Yeah, not dissimilar from the last pull around that we saw as well. Likewise, our previous teams didn't have Gorfien's Grasp at that point either, but the majority of the stage runs together anyway. They're not really casting too much. So a Chaos Nova, as well as all the AoE abilities that come in, can easily reach the majority of them without the Gorfien's Grasp.
Free Pumps pulling the remaining ushers, after which they will 99% chance head off over to the Maiden of Virtue, of course. A lot of dangerous trash coming up here in that Maiden of Virtue hall. There's lots of debuffs going out from some of those casters that can just combo into one-shots on some of the players. So once again, the same theme that we've seen for a lot of the trash in this dungeon. Not only will the tank need to keep kind of kiting, getting away, making sure necrotic doesn't get too out of hand, but you also want to make sure you're properly crowd controlling all of these targets as to not get any fatalities in the group.
Yeah, if you can run all the way up, then you're in a really good spot. But it looks like they're just kind of separating these up. Oh, wait, did they pull all these from the previous room? So this isn't actually... Okay, so just wanting to be in a little bit of a safer spot with these guys to line of sight them initially and then be able to focus down the AoE potential once they get around that corner.
Yeah, so this should be, after finishing these off, I would assume running all the way down the hall and line of sighting around the corner in Maiden of Virtue's room, as you alluded to. Goinmul on the left side of the screen, just only now dealing with the ushers. They're starting to kind of fall more and more behind. I mean, they had their hiccup on the boss, but since then, they did the proper pull backstage under the stage as well, killed everything there. They're doing the ushers, they're doing the front of the stage now, but everything seems to be just a bit slower than Free Pumps right now.
Yeah, the choice of when they were killing off the ushers wasn't quite as efficient as Free Pumps, and it certainly wasn't as efficient as the prior run that we actually watched here in Lower Kara. So slight disparity between how they're being able to control this, but Free Pumps on the other side, though, they've been able to line of sight all of those and be able to effectively deal with them just before the Maiden of Virtue.
So Maiden of Virtue, let's talk about that a bit. Now, she does have kind of two phases to the fight. First one having some basic abilities like a nuke on the tank that needs to be interrupted. The players will need to spread out well as to not link that, chain that Holy Bolt together, as it does do increasing damage with every jump. The main mechanic really of the fight comes in the Consecration debuff that you will add, or that you will give to a random player. They will need to run it to the side of the map as to not spread it too much into the room and kind of, you know, save some of that real estate.
Yeah.
Eventually, after 2 Consecrates, she will go into a Holy Wrath casting phase. During that, she will gain a shield, and you have to break the shield in order, of course, to interrupt that deadly cast.
And that can be the advantage of having like double ranged compositions. Unfortunately, here it was actually just on the healer by the looks of things, that first Consecration with the Maiden of Virtue. But with the double range composition, at least you're not having to have like a heavier melee composition, have to completely run away, lose some of that damage, and be able to get back in. Of course, if it's a Demon Hunter, it's like you fell rush out, you fell rush back in. So it's not that big, but these minor things that are going to be able to cost you in a race like this.
It does add up. Free Pumps also having drawn in one of those Undying Servants, aptly named Undying, of course, because it survived this entire time. Likely using it to their advantage, perhaps with some Cephas procs, or just efficiently dragging it over, because it does cast a lot of debuffs and does have more health than some of these other mobs. Want to make sure that you're not wasting too much time just on one target. Maiden of Virtue now entering her cast phase here for Free Pumps, easily breaking through that shield and managing to interrupt her before returning to the first phase. While Goinmul on the left side of the screen, we do see they're rearing up for that large pull.
Definitely one of the easier moments, and kind of somewhere in Lower Kara where you can kind of get a breather here in Maiden of Virtue, just be able to kind of step into that Consecrate. Once the Mass Repentance comes down, just be able to step on out, deal with the shield. It's not too big a deal for teams at this rate. With 20% just remaining here on Maiden of Virtue, Free Pumps looking to be free rolling right now.
Right, you are indeed. Now, the dream here really is to get her down before her next Holy Wrath phase, because as soon as she starts that cast, you just waste so much time needing to chew through the shield. Even if she casts it, I mean, the nightmare is just to cast it right at 1%, and then you got to sit there chewing through that heavy shield, and then find, and they do get it off, unfortunately. Don't have enough of that single target. They do have to chew through this through this shield and interrupt that Holy Wrath, losing a bit of time. So, again, potentially some time that Goinmul might be able to make up on the left side of the screen. As we see, they do finish up some of that trash. Only 2 deaths on the board for them versus Free Pumps 4.
Yeah, so I'm going to be seeing them now just veering off to the right-hand side as they go out of this tunnel down towards the Room of Morrows. And we saw, you know, once again, a very big pull in our previous game. Likewise, we're expecting kind of a similar thing. We actually had the Gorfian's Grasp come out in the previous game, and it didn't quite capture everything as efficiently as they would have liked it to have. So this is actually can be a bit of a scary pull. Let's see how it's going to go for Elky with that AMS popped.
Unfortunately, Elky does get caught on the chair. They're making note that they're not playing musical chairs right now, getting out of the way and immediately AoE gripping everything. Now, as you aptly mentioned, there are some mobs in here that cannot be actually gripped, such as these Wardens, if I'm not mistaken. But luckily, they do move quickly enough that they pile up right away on top of the pack. Guests melt right away, and the Wardens now just have to be finished off before they get ready to pull Morose. We have 40 seconds on that Bloodlust timer, something they will definitely want to take advantage of on Morose coming up.
Yeah, Morose can be quite the tricky customer, or customers plural, as they're going to be gearing up for that, as the Wardens take a hell of a lot longer to die than I was expecting. I guess that's the fortified for you, so they will be able to clean those up and get them killed off. But one thing's for sure is that as much as they've had 4 deaths compared to the 2 on Goinmul's side, it's not really hindered them too much at all. They are still being able to project forwards quite quickly now going into Morrows.
If I'm not mistaken, their 4 deaths are actually because of that skip at the beginning of the map, so it's really not something that would have you know, halted progression too much. They do opt to deal with Druger and Millstripe first. Millstripe, who will need to be definitely interrupted for that mana drain that she does immediately, else it will, well, drain mana and also successfully stun whoever she's casting it on, likely the healer. Now, we do have to discuss about Morose here. You know, he does blink away occasionally, shadow stepping to a random target, applying the Garrote debuff to them. They don't have the advantage of a Blessing of Protection from a Paladin here, so any Garrote that does go on the player will need to be healed through, and it is really important, especially in this necrotic setting, that they kill the dinner guests immediately, is to not get too many stacks of necrotic on that tank.
Yeah, it can really kind of scale out of control here, as I'm going to pull Crispin down as well to start working on him eventually. But as you say, without that bop, it can be a bit treacherous, but they do have some of their own personal cooldowns available to them as that continues on. Unfortunately for them, not going on to, say, the Warlock, for example, who could quite easily deal with that kind of thing, but at least they have some, you know, abilities on the Druids as well. It's okay.
Arsenal doing well there to punt that first cast from Crispin. If you're caught in that frontal cast, you yourself will actually be crispy indeed. It does do a huge amount of holy damage. You can displace him via a grip or punt. In this case, of course, you can't interrupt it though with a kick. So you want to make sure to move out of the way, not get too far away from him. Last dinner guest does come down for free pumps as they cleave everything down. Darius, there he is, as he throws his whirling blade in the middle of the room, giving pretty substantial amount of area denial for the groups.
Yeah, definitely. But again, you know, when it comes to these kind of ranged compositions, it's not too impactful, so they're able to negate that quite nicely. There's a huge amount of room to be able to move around in here in this room itself, but one thing that can be annoying sometimes are the chairs. Maybe you get kind of clipped on them and it's like, well, okay, but thankfully the weapons aren't moving too fast, so it's not too bad.
Interesting to see that they actually keep Millstripe alive and just interrupt whenever her mana drain comes up. They opt not to kill her, likely for, I would assume, maybe some Cephas procs, whatever it may be on the side, but they don't make her join the rest of the group and cleave her down, even though she really wouldn't be any danger for necrotic to the tank. Actually, just chain cast. So they're clearly doing it for a tactical advantage on the side of the room there and interrupting it well. Morose now down to 15% health for free pumps.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, to the kind of untrained eye, it's like, well, why would you leave these alive? But the thing is that if you pump all your damage into those and you're not dealing with Morrows, these eventually just go away anyway once Morrows is gone. So you can quite happily kind of negate some of the time spent on the extra dinner guests and just kill off Morrows and just move on your merry way.
But you don't want to be doing Lessos damage in that encounter. They do typically, as we see a lot of the time, I would say this pull is more typical than going through the kitchen that we see from some of the groups. They go around the side through that kind of ballroom area and will be working down towards Adam in a moment. Free pumps. Goinmul on the left side of the screen, just now getting the CC on their dinner guests and getting ready to pull Morose. We'll keep an eye on that one. Free pumps grabbing the guests, nuking them down quickly, and now we're moving down to Adaman's room. Now, we've seen a couple of different pulls here, especially last week. We've seen some awesome pulls where they just kill a bit of the trash at the start and then purposefully pull Adaman right away as to immediately AoE aggro everything in the room and then filter out the side of the room.
Yeah, it can be really cool to see. They're actually moving to that right-hand side here and getting quite a big pull to start things off, and then potentially they could do it later on down the line. But on a fortified setting, it can be really, really treacherous. Some of these, like horses, for example, able to charge around and really knock everybody for a bell or two, and then beyond that, it can get scary. But even just having this controlled horse as well and just going to be able to Wraith walk away and start kiting this so Elsie doesn't take too much damage.
Right, you are. So you want to make sure, of course, with these horses, it's not even just the horse. Well, actually, the horses can be a problem because they can charge the tank that's trying to get away further. Excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse. They are charging the tank that's just a little getting out of the way. They charge successfully if they're not CC'd properly and get that extra melee in just before that 10 seconds lines up. Falls off rather for the tank, and then you lead a situation where, well, the tank's kind of screwed, running into corner by themselves with a huge stack of necrotic. No problem here for them. Free pumps in the meantime.
Yep, having the Warlock available, always very, very nice. Getting those drain stones off towards the back, but obviously the slows that are available to Avalanche while that is happening is always very good. Now, where are they going to go? Are they going to try for this big pull? As looks like they are going to.
Looks like they're doing everything and not actually opting to reset Adaman in this case. So
yeah,
the real danger here lies, actually, first of all, there's a ton that needs to be interrupted. We have the stable hands that will heal some of the horses that charge that we talked about, but also just the necrotic on the tank. I mean, you're going to have to reset that at some point. We do see the stacks now shooting over 10 for the tank. All of the trash is now dead. They've reached that 100%. Bloodlust well used there. Midnight has dismounted. Adaman has dismounted on Midnight. We have 2 deaths coming up. Immediately 2 battle reses come up, though, and they continue to hammer as much damage into Adaman as possible, not wanting to waste the rest of this Bloodlust.
Dodging the charges as well with that, and at the same time here, free pumps, you know, so far ahead here, going more 79% and just getting them set back up here in front of Morrows. So really far behind. But the thing is that being able to have the control with the Solar Beam. You know, those charges aren't able to be dealt with too fast, but they did so much damage into that spot while this was going on. It was really good control.
So you have to be careful with these spectral charger walls. They will one-shot you, maybe not in this fortified setting, but they do a fair bit of damage, spawning a set number of radius yards away from the boss, which is why you see the players well hugging Midnight as to make sure that one of the walls doesn't unluckily spawn on top of them. We unfortunately did see a full wipe out of Goinmul on the left side of the screen on Morose, which is why they're repulling now. Won't have that Bloodlust accessible again for a while. While Free Pumps is just, I mean, free reigning on Adamin right now, making sure that they DPS him down sufficiently here so he does not remount Midnight, which will occur when Midnight is 100% healed.
Yeah, they don't need to be taking too many risks here either if they want to. They probably know how far they are ahead of Goinmul, and that charge will continue to come out here as LC just being able to tank Adamin up quite nice. And he will get back on. So, yeah, it didn't look like they were in too much of a frenzy. They don't really have to risk anything, do anything here.
No, they did lose a lot of damage, unfortunately, with those 2 deaths halfway through Bloodlust. But indeed, Adamin does saddle back up onto Midnight. More Spectral Horse walls are spawning. The team does well once again to move as a group away from those walls, not having any of those, not risking any of those walls spawn on top of them. Midnight will once again kick Adamin off at 50%. They should have more than enough damage this time to just complete the encounter, finish Adamin off, and then take Midnight down.
Yeah, it's very good control. I think one thing that really impressed me about the Midnight pull with the rest of the trash as well is, like, you see a lot of these big pulls, and then a Blood Death Knight would like to be able to just try and kite away from those pulls because they can be very deadly, especially as you mentioned with the Necrotic, but you can't really do that when you've aggroed the boss as well. You don't want to go too far away and potentially have to reset Midnight, because that would be disastrous.
Especially in such a small enclosed room, you just don't have that option. Midnight will be falling here for Free Pumps nonetheless, and Goinmul will be unfortunately going to the lower bracket.
They will indeed, as we do see the completed run there coming out of Free Pumps. It wasn't quite enough for Midnight, unable to stop him there. And that's going to be another 2-0 from this team, Goinmul, who obviously provided the upset for us at the end of yesterday. Couldn't quite do it in this one, and they will lose and drop down to that lower bracket. But that means, of course, that we will have our Free Marcy versus Free Pumps in the upper bracket, and the winner will qualify to the global stage.
He's so happy.
I just 2 free teams. Who's getting freed?
Yeah.
But I mean, they did really well. Really dominant performance there by Free Pumps. There was, I wouldn't say maybe the cleanest run in the world from them. I mean, they did have some hiccups, and we just saw it right at the end there with that massive pull. I mean, that is a risky pull, especially Necrotic on, of course, on Adamin. But, you know, a lot of residual damage. It wasn't even the tank that fell in the end, 2 of their DPS. Luckily, they had those 2 battle reses alive. However, this was Goinmul's map pick, and they just, I mean, it just didn't work out for them. A wipe on Morose, you know, a lot of sloppiness. They had that death as well on the first boss and needing to use that battle res. That right out the get-go, the Holy Paladin died when they were trying to use that Invis pod. So things just weren't going their way.
I mean, at least they go down to the lower bracket. Goinmul ain't going home just yet, so I'm happy with that.
Yep, they will, of course, still have that opportunity, but it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for them. I think both the Korean sides have been struggling just a little bit. It was very interesting to see yesterday that Free Marcy obviously was given the tough run by one of the Korean sides, and Goinmul, of course, made a victory actually coming out of yesterday. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two teams do perform, but we have to focus our attention now to that upper bracket. We've got Free Pumps, we've got Free Marcy, and not only is it like this Battle of the Freedom, and we can joke about that quite a lot, it's also the winner qualifies to the global stage. The winner will represent ANZ and, of course, Asia Pacific in general at that global finals, and they'll be the first team to do so. So definitely going to be very interesting to see which way we go with that. And I'm also really curious which way Free Pumps are going to go with their composition, because we've seen safe from them, and now we could see risky if they need to beat Free Marcy.
It's tough to say what is risky and what's safe for them. I mean, they demonstrated that with both the comps that they just used here, they were safe. I mean, they performed well with either of them. They didn't have the Windwalkers, especially in a setting where, you know, in lower carry, you really want some Windwalkers in there, especially without that bursting. So, I mean, they did well with either. So it's tough to say. You don't really know what their comfort pick is. And as we get into some of the later stages of the MDI, and we get into, you know, hopefully future MDIs as well, you're going to see that a lot of players start to get away from this idea and this typecasting that they only play one class well, and they start to professionally diversify in different classes so that they can bring, you know, we're seeing swaps between healers, we're seeing the Holy Paladins, the rest of druids come out. You expect the same of the tanks. Obviously, Blood DKs are in a very strong presence right now, but what happens if that's not the case. You expect your tank to diversify, and I expect nothing less from the DPS.
I mean, realistically, I would like to see them kind of fall back onto the double Windwalker play. If you're going to be going up against a world champion like Free Marcy, you kind of have to pull out all the stops. And I think for a lot of us, we see Windwalker monks and potentially multiple Windwalker monks as pulling out all the stops. They just thrive in so many situations and are able to stay alive in so many situations. So I would love to see them fall back onto it. Whether they do or not, though, is debatable.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely saw some shaky deaths for the Windwalkers and the Hunters, like, throughout this instance on the other side on Goinmul, so I can understand why they'd go slightly safer, but definitely you've got to pull out the stops against the world champions. We can have a little look over at that bracket right now to see how the upper bracket is playing out. It's definitely going to be something quite interesting to see how they do play this one, as we have Free Marcy, and we're not quite a bracket, but we're pretty close. There we go. We've got Free Marcy against Free Pumps. Winner qualifies to the global stage. You can see, of course, that top 2 in the finals, and actually a little update for us in the lower bracket as well. Sai were able to pick up a victory on Nelf Slayer, so they won Upakara and Nelf Slayer against Pure Luck and win that series 2-1. They'll be going up against Gulch Trotters in their next series, and of course we're still waiting on Team BTS versus Substitute before we'll drop into that lower bracket later on to see how we're doing. But it's been very interesting to see how these brackets have played out, and Sai is definitely one that I'm looking forward to seeing on broadcast in their next series. Yeah,
they had a bit of a rough time yesterday, but I think that overall they definitely have the chops to be able to kind of propel themselves on through that lower bracket, kind of like a CBA that we saw from you know, China, in terms of that kind of similar vein at least. But I think that Sai probably has a better opportunity to try and polish themselves all the way, I would say.
Yep, well, Adaman couldn't stop Free Pumps as the team does complete their, well, they complete their midnight stroll through Lower Karazhan to defeat the team. They were able to beat Goinmul, and now they've secured us a Free Pumps versus Free Marcy Grand Final. That's going to be one to get very excited for the winner will qualify to the Grand Finals, the Global Finals, representing ANZ Australia. This is the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Don't go anywhere. Grand Finals up next.